I watched my husband sign the partnership papers with my own eyes, and 3 weeks later, he served me divorce papers like they were nothing. That's the moment everything went sideways. Standing in our kitchen, our beautiful, freshly renovated kitchen with the marble countertops he'd insisted on, holding those legal documents with my hands shaking so badly I could barely read the typed words. Brandon had been at the office late. He said he'd gotten held up with the closing details. I believed him because I was stupid enough to believe him about everything. But here's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't hit you all at once. It hits you in waves. First wave was the papers themselves. Second wave was what came after. Let me back up though, because you need to understand what came before. You need to understand the life I thought I had. We've been married for 9 years. 9 years of what I genuinely believed was a partnership. Ironic word choice, I know now. Brandon and I met at a marketing firm in Atlanta, where I was a senior strategist and he was working in business development. He was charming, ambitious, the kind of guy who made you feel like you were the center of his world. Within 6 months of meeting, he'd moved in. Within 2 years, we were engaged. 3 years after that, we bought our house in Alpharetta. The house was everything to me. A 2,800 square foot colonial on a half-acre lot, white brick, black shutters, a front porch where we'd eventually sit in rocking chairs. That's what I thought anyway. We paid $485,000 for it in 2019. The mortgage was $3,200 a month, and between my income and his, it felt manageable. More than manageable. It felt like proof that we were building something real. I was making $115,000 a year by then. Brandon was making roughly the same, maybe a bit less, though he never liked to talk specifics. He'd been recruited by his current company, Vantage Capital, about 4 years ago. It was a boutique investment firm, maybe 30 employees total, and the CEO was this guy named Richard Kellerman. Richard was intense, old school, the type who believed in loyalty and long hours. Brandon loved it. He'd come home talking about deals, about how Richard had taken him under his wing, about how partnership was just around the corner. 2 years, he'd say. Richard told me 2 years and you'll be a partner. That's 6 figures plus equity. 6 figures plus equity. That phrase started showing up in our conversations more and more. We started planning around it. I wanted to go back to school, maybe get an MBA, and Brandon said, wait until the partnership comes through. Then we'll have breathing room. We wanted to start a family, but we kept saying the same thing. Once the partnership happens, we'll be in a much stronger position. Everything was contingent on that partnership. By early 2024, it was clear it was finally happening. Brandon started acting differently. Not like he was excited, like he was nervous. He'd get home later than usual. He'd take calls in his study with the door closed. He mentioned that Richard wanted to talk to me, which seemed weird but also kind of nice. Like, the CEO wanted to meet the wife. That felt like inclusion, like respect. Then came the day in late March when Brandon said Richard wanted us to come to his office. Just a casual thing, he said. Maybe take me to lunch afterward to celebrate. We drove downtown in separate cars because I had to get back for a client call, and I remember thinking how strange that was. Why not drive together? Richard's office was on the 22nd floor of a glass building near Lenox. The views were insane. You could see all of Atlanta spreading out below you like a map of possibility. Richard himself was exactly what I expected. Silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of handshake that tries to communicate dominance. Jennifer, he said, holding my hand a beat too long. Brandon's told me so much about you. You're in marketing, correct? Senior strategist, I said. I work primarily with tech and SaaS clients. Excellent, excellent. He gestured to the chairs in front of his desk. I wanted to speak with both of you because I'm making Brandon a partner, effective immediately. The papers are being drawn up, and we should have everything finalized within the week. I felt Brandon tense next to me. But Richard kept going, and I remember thinking this was the moment. This was the moment we'd been waiting for. As a partner, Richard continued, Brandon will have a draw of $180,000 annually, plus equity in the firm. The equity will vest over 5 years, but based on our current valuations, we're talking significant wealth accumulation. He leaned back in his chair, looking pleased with himself. We'll want to protect this arrangement, of course. We require all partners to sign non-competes and confidentiality agreements. Very standard. But also, and this is important, we require partners to be fully committed to the firm. Something in how he said that made my spine tighten. Fully committed. What did that even mean? What does that look like? I asked. Richard smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It means Brandon's career is with us. No distractions. No divided loyalties. He was looking at Brandon when he said it, not at me. And that's when I saw something flicker across my husband's face. Something like shame, maybe. Or fear. But the moment passed, and Richard was congratulating us, and Brandon was shaking his hand, and we were walking back to the elevators with the congratulations still ringing in our ears. In the elevator, I hugged him. We did it, I said. Oh my God, we actually did it. Brandon held me, but his arms didn't close all the way around me. He felt distant, present, but gone. Yeah, he said quietly. We did. He signed the papers 5 days later. I remember him bringing home a copy, this thick document with his signature on it in blue ink. He set it on the kitchen counter like it was made of glass. There, he said. Partner. I made pasta that night. We had wine. We didn't talk much. I thought it was the nervous energy of accomplishment, the strange letdown that comes after you've been chasing something for so long and suddenly you've caught it. I didn't know it was the calm before everything fell apart. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, Brandon came into the kitchen already dressed for work. He was wearing that expression again, the one I'd seen in Richard's office, the one that meant he was afraid of something. We need to talk, he said. Those words, those 4 words, are the ones that changed everything. We need to talk, he said. Those words, those 4 words, are the ones that changed everything. I set down my coffee mug slowly. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Morning light was coming through the windows, that clean Atlanta light that makes everything look like it's supposed to work out. It doesn't. Okay, I said, my stomach already tightening. What's wrong? Brandon pulled out one of the bar stools and sat down. He didn't look at me. That was the first sign that this wasn't just a conversation. It was an announcement. I want a divorce, he said. The words didn't register at first. They just sat there in the air like something in a foreign language, something my brain refused to translate. I laughed, actually laughed, because it was so absurd, so completely out of nowhere that my only defense was to treat it like a joke. That's not funny, I said. I'm not joking. He was still not looking at me. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle working. His hands were folded on the counter in front of him like he was trying to keep them from doing something else. Brandon, what the hell are you talking about? My voice had gone up an octave. You just made partner. We literally just celebrated. 3 weeks ago, we were talking about taking a trip to Cabo. I know. You know? That's your answer? You know? I could hear myself getting louder, but I couldn't stop it. This was the part of me that was going into shock, the part that was still trying to rewrite what was happening. Why? Why would you want a divorce? He was quiet for so long, I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, I can't explain it. You can't explain wanting to end 9 years of marriage? That's insane, Brandon. That's actually insane. Is there someone else? Are you having an affair? No. Then what? What could possibly... I stopped. Something was clicking in my head, something horrible. Did Richard tell you to do this? Brandon's head came up fast. His eyes met mine for the first time that morning, and what I saw there was panic. What? No. Why would you? Because that's what he meant, I said. When he said no divided loyalties, When he said you had to be fully committed, he meant I was standing up now, pacing, my mind racing. He meant you had to choose between me and the partnership. Jennifer, that's not. It is. It's exactly what it is. And you chose the money. You chose the equity and the 6 figures and whatever else, and you're getting rid of me to do it. Brandon stood up. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Explain it to me, please. I'm asking you to explain this in a way that makes any kind of sense. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd seen him do 1,000 times when he was frustrated or stressed. But he'd never done it like this, like he was trying to claw his way out of something. Richard has requirements for the partners, he said finally. Requirements that go beyond the contract. What kind of requirements? He wants partners who are unencumbered, no distractions, no personal situations that could complicate their availability or their focus. I stared at him. So marriage is a distraction? He doesn't want married partners. He prefers single men. Or men in relationships he controls. Relationships that don't. Brandon stopped himself. That don't what? That don't require emotional investment that takes away from the firm. The kitchen tilted a little. I sat back down on the other bar stool because I wasn't sure my legs would hold me. So he told you to get a divorce? I said quietly. And you just said okay. He didn't tell me to. He made it clear that's what he prefers. And Jennifer, the equity alone, even if I lose half of it in a divorce, we're still talking about significant money. And the draw alone is enough to what? To replace me? To buy a new wife? To take care of you, he said, and the desperation in his voice made it worse somehow, made it more real. I'm not trying to hurt you, but this is an opportunity I can't pass up. An opportunity to dump your wife? An opportunity to build real wealth, real security. And you'll be fine, Jennifer. You make 6 figures yourself. You have options. I laughed again, that same shocked laugh. My options? What about our options? What about the life we built together? We can still. He started to reach across the counter toward me, but I pulled my hands away. We can still be friends. We can work this out civilly. I'm not trying to take anything from you. The house, you can keep it. I'll keep making the mortgage payments until. You think this is about the house? Then what is it about? It's about the fact that I trusted you, I said. It's about the fact that I believed you when you said this partnership would change our lives. I thought you meant together. I thought that was the whole point. Brandon was quiet. When are you leaving? I asked. I found an apartment in Buckhead. I'm moving in this weekend. This weekend, 3 days away. He'd already found an apartment. He'd already made plans. While I was at work, while I was with clients, while I was living the life I thought we had, he was making phone calls and touring places and arranging to leave. Does Richard know you told me? Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. How thoughtful, I said. So when are you going to tell him you told me? Is that part of the protocol? Do you need his approval to have this conversation with me? Jennifer, no, I'm done. I'm done with this conversation and I'm done with you. Get out. What? Get out of the kitchen. Get out of the house. Go to work, go to your apartment. I don't care. Just get out. Brandon stood there for a moment, like he thought I would change my mind. Like I would suddenly see this from his perspective and agree that leaving me was the right move. I didn't. I turned away from him and stared at the marble countertop he'd picked out, the one that cost more than my first car, and I waited until I heard him leave. That was Tuesday morning. By Wednesday evening, the panic had set in. I called a divorce attorney, Lauren Chen, recommended by my friend Michelle, and sat in her office with my hands shaking as she explained the basics. Community property state, equitable distribution, 401k, the house, the car, everything acquired during the marriage would be split. But he's already moved out, I said. Does that affect anything? It can, Lauren said, making notes. It might suggest abandonment, but in Georgia that's not as clear-cut as it used to be. The bigger question is whether there's an infidelity clause. You said there's no other woman? He says no. Do you believe him? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that at least I still knew my husband well enough to know the truth about something. But the person I thought I knew had just told me he was leaving me for a job, so my track record for reading him seemed pretty questionable. I don't know, I admitted. Lauren slid a contract across the desk, $1,500 retainer. I signed it without really reading it because I didn't have the capacity to read anything longer than a sentence. My brain felt like it was operating in slow motion, 3 steps behind everything that was happening. By Thursday, Brandon had sent me a text asking when would be a good time to come get his clothes and personal items. His clothes, his personal items. Like the house was already not his anymore. Like 9 years of shared space could be divided into his stuff and my stuff that easily. I didn't respond. I couldn't think of a response that wouldn't result in me saying something I couldn't take back, and Lauren had warned me about that. Everything you communicate with him can be used in court, she'd said. Keep it professional. Keep it documented. Friday morning, my boss called me into her office. Jennifer, you seem off, Karen said. Karen was great. She'd been my mentor for the last 5 years, and she actually cared about her people, not just the revenue they brought in. Everything okay? I could have lied. I could have said I was just tired or had a migraine or was working on a big pitch. Instead, I burst into tears in her office while she sat there looking horrified and handed me a box of tissues. My husband is divorcing me, I said. I found out on Tuesday. He's moving because his CEO told him marriage was a distraction. I watched Karen's expression shift from concern to anger. His CEO told him? She didn't finish the sentence. Who's the company? Vantage Capital. His CEO is Richard Kellerman. Karen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You need to talk to someone, a real lawyer, not just a divorce attorney, someone who understands employment law." What do you mean? I mean that what you're describing, coercing an employee to end his marriage as a condition of employment, that's potentially illegal. That's potentially a huge liability for his company. And if your husband signed partnership papers under duress, those papers might not be worth the ink they're printed on. I'd been so focused on the divorce, on Brandon leaving, on the logistics of separating a life I'd built with someone, that I hadn't even considered the possibility that Richard's demand might not be legal. Really? I asked. Really. You should call my lawyer friend. His name is Tom Whitfield. He handles employment litigation. Tell him I sent you. That conversation changed everything, but not in a good way. Not at first. Tom was different from Lauren. Where Lauren was methodical and calm, Tom was angry on my behalf in a way that made me realize just how badly I'd been fucked over. "This is extraordinary," he said after I'd explained the situation. "Do you have documentation of this requirement? Any written communication?" "Not from Richard," I said, "but Brandon told me. I could probably get it on a recording if you talked about it again. That's one-party consent in Georgia, so yes, that would be admissible. But here's what I'm thinking." Tom leaned back in his chair. "Your husband is now in a position where his entire financial future depends on this partnership. The partnership was essentially offered as a condition of ending your marriage. That's coercion. That's potentially illegal under employment law. And if we can prove it, we can not only dismantle the partnership agreement, we can potentially go after Vantage Capital for damages." Damages? How much? Depends on the firm's net value. Could be substantial. Could be very substantial. The word substantial hung in the air between us. I thought about the equity, the 6 figures, the future Richard had dangled in front of Brandon like bait. "So what do?" I asked. First, you talk to your husband again. You get him to admit on record that this was a requirement from Richard. You get specifics. You get dates and conversations. Then we go after both of them. I walked out of Tom's office feeling something I hadn't felt since Tuesday morning. Hope. It was false hope. I didn't know that yet. I called Brandon that evening. He picked up on the second ring, and I could hear that he was somewhere loud, probably at a bar with whoever he hung out with now, whoever was part of this new life he'd already started building. "We need to talk," I said. "In person. Tomorrow." "Jennifer, tomorrow. My house. Noon." He agreed, which should have been my first warning. Saturday morning, I set up my phone in the living room, hidden behind a picture frame, with the recording app running. My hands were shaking as I did it. This felt like a violation somehow, even though it was my house and my marriage and my right to try to protect myself. When Brandon arrived, he looked worse than he had on Tuesday. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he'd lost weight. Stress weight loss, probably. Guilt weight loss. "What's going on?" he asked. "Why did you need to see me?" "I've been talking to my lawyer," I said. "And I've also been talking to an employment lawyer. And he says what Richard did, what he told you to do, might be illegal." Brandon's face went white. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that Richard coerced you into divorcing me as a condition of your partnership. I'm talking about the fact that might violate employment law. I'm talking about the fact that we might be able to sue Vantage Capital for damages." "You can't," Brandon started, then stopped. "Jennifer, you can't do that." "Why not? It's the truth, isn't it? Richard told you to get divorced. He made it clear that marriage was incompatible with being a partner at his firm." "You don't understand," Brandon said, and now he looked scared. Actually scared. "You can't go after Richard." "Why not?" "Because," he ran his hands through his hair again, that stressed gesture. "Because he'll destroy me. He has non-competes, non-disparagement clauses. If I'm involved in any lawsuit against him, he'll sue me back. He'll take the partnership. He'll ruin my career." "So you're just going to let him ruin our marriage instead?" "I'm trying to protect myself," Brandon said. "I'm trying to build something. And if you go after him, he'll come after me. And I won't survive it, Jennifer. I can't survive it." I stared at him. The man in front of me was not the man I'd married. The man I'd married would have told Richard Kellerman to go to hell. The man I'd married would have chosen me over a partnership, over equity, over anything. But this man, this version of Brandon, was willing to let his wife be destroyed rather than risk his own future. "You're not going to help me," I said. It wasn't a question. "I can't," he whispered. "You won't." "I can't, Jennifer. Please don't make me choose between my career and helping you. You know how important this is to me." "More important than I am?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I walked him to the door without saying anything else. When he left, I felt something inside me break that I wasn't sure could be repaired. That's when I realized I was completely alone. Brandon wasn't going to help me. My lawyer could only go so far. I was facing this by myself. And that's when everything got worse. I sat in Tom's office on a Monday morning, 2 weeks after Brandon had walked out of my house for the last time. The divorce papers were on his desk, the ones Brandon's lawyer had sent over, the ones that confirmed my worst fear. He was taking the partnership money and running, and he wasn't going to help me prove that Richard had coerced him into destroying our marriage. "We need leverage," Tom said, tapping a pen against his notepad. "Right now, your husband is the only person who can confirm that Richard made this a condition of the partnership. And he's not going to do it voluntarily because his entire financial future depends on keeping Richard happy." "So what do?" I asked. "We get evidence from somewhere else. People talk, Jennifer, especially men like Richard. Someone at that firm knows what's going on. Someone's heard him say it." That's when my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, Jennifer. My name is Marcus. I work at Vantage Capital. I need to talk to you about Richard. It's important." I showed the message to Tom. His expression shifted from resignation to something like hunger. "Reply," he said. "Tell him you'll meet him. Tonight. Somewhere public." Marcus turned out to be a junior analyst, mid-20s, nervous energy, the kind of guy who looked like he hadn't slept in days. We met at a coffee shop in Midtown, and the first thing he did was order a black coffee he didn't drink. "I heard what happened," he said quietly, "with you and Brandon. Word gets around the office, and Richard doesn't really hide the fact that he's pleased with himself." "He told people?" "Not directly, but he made a comment in a meeting about how partners need to have their priorities straight and how married men have conflicts of interest. And then he started talking about how he only hires single guys for partnership track, or guys who are willing to prove their loyalty by ending relationships that interfere with the firm." I felt something cold settle in my chest. He said that in a meeting? In front of me, David Chen, he's another analyst, and Jessica Hartley, who's in HR. Jessica looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. "Richard's the CEO. You don't argue with him." "Would Jessica talk to me?" I asked. Marcus hesitated. "Maybe. She's been there for 3 years, and I don't think she likes what's happening. But she's scared. Richard's not someone you cross." Tom had told me to get everything on tape if I could, but Marcus wasn't offering to record anything. What he was offering was a name. Someone in HR who might be willing to corroborate what was happening. I called Jessica Hartley's personal number the next morning. Marcus had given it to me with the warning that she might not pick up, that she might not want to talk to me at all. She picked up on the second ring. "I can't talk at work," she said, before I'd even introduced myself. "If you want to meet me, it has to be away from the office." We met at a Starbucks near her apartment in Virginia Highland. Jessica was older than I expected, maybe late 40s, with the kind of tired eyes that come from working in HR at a company with serious problems. "I've been documenting things," she said, sliding a folder across the table toward me. "Not officially, just for myself, because I knew something like this would happen eventually, and I wanted to be protected." Inside the folder were emails, dozens of them. Emails from Richard to Jessica about partnership requirements, about ensuring partners are focused, about the need to eliminate personal distractions. There was one email in particular that made my hands shake. "Jessica, I need to discuss Brandon's situation before we finalize his partnership. He's married, which presents a potential problem. I'd like him to understand that we prefer our partners to be unencumbered. Can you handle this conversation, or should I?" And Jessica's response? "Richard, I'm uncomfortable with this request. It may violate employment law. I'd recommend consulting legal counsel before proceeding." And Richard's reply? "Not your concern. I'll handle it myself." "He went around you," I said. "He went around me," Jessica confirmed. And then Brandon came to me crying after the conversation. He said Richard had made it clear that the partnership was contingent on him getting divorced. He asked me if he could sue Richard for that. I told him I didn't know, but that he should talk to a lawyer. He never did. He just accepted it. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. "Because what Richard is doing is wrong," Jessica said. "And because I have a daughter, and I wouldn't want someone treating her the way he's treating you. And because I'm tired of being complicit in something illegal just because I need my paycheck." I made copies of everything that afternoon. Tom read through the emails 3 times, and on the third read-through, he smiled. "This is it," he said. "This is everything we need. He's admitted in writing that he's conditioning the partnership on your husband ending his marriage. That's coercion. That's a violation of public policy. And Jessica is willing to testify?" "She said she would," I told him, "though I think she's terrified." "She should be, but she's doing the right thing." We filed the lawsuit on a Friday. Tom's office sent the complaint to Vantage Capital's legal team, and within 2 hours, Richard's lawyer was calling, demanding a meeting. Tom refused to meet in person. Instead, he sent a letter outlining what we had: the emails, Jessica's testimony, the clear evidence that Richard had coerced Brandon into divorcing me as a condition of his employment. Richard's response came the next morning. He demanded that I sign an NDA and accept a settlement in exchange for dropping the lawsuit. The number was $500,000. I laughed when Tom told me the amount, actually laughed, because it was so transparent. Richard wasn't offering me money because he was generous or because he felt bad. He was offering me money because he knew what I had on him would destroy his firm. "What do I do?" I asked. "You decide," Tom said. "You can take the $500,000 and walk away, or you can go to trial and potentially get much more, plus the satisfaction of taking him down publicly." I thought about Brandon, about the way he'd looked at me in the kitchen when I asked him to help me, about the fact that he'd chosen money and fear over his wife, about the fact that he'd let Richard Kellerman ruin my life so he could keep his partnership. "I want to go to trial," I said. The deposition process was brutal. Richard sat across from me in a conference room with his lawyer, a silver-haired man named Mitchell, and he was calm the whole time, unnaturally calm, like he'd already decided this wasn't going to hurt him. Tom walked him through it step by step. The emails, the conversations, the clear language in his communications about preferring single partners. "Is it true," Tom asked, "that you told Brandon Mitchell that his marriage was incompatible with being a partner at your firm?" Richard smiled. "I told Brandon that partnerships require full commitment. I didn't specify how he should manage his personal life." "But you made it clear that marriage was a distraction?" "I made it clear that partners need to be focused." "And when he told you he was getting divorced, you didn't suggest he reconsider?" "Why would I? His personal decisions are his own." It was masterful deflection. He hadn't technically said anything incriminating in the deposition, but the emails said everything. The emails were the smoking gun, and Mitchell knew it. The trial started on a Wednesday in September. The courtroom was small. The judge was a woman named Patricia Morrison, who'd been on the bench for 20 years, and I sat in the front row with my hands folded in my lap, trying not to think about the fact that my entire future was about to be decided in this room. Tom called Jessica first. She was terrified. I could see her hands shaking as she raised her right hand to be sworn in, but she testified clearly and calmly about the emails, about Richard's instructions to condition the partnership on Brandon's divorce, about her own concerns that what he was doing was illegal. "Did you raise these concerns with Mr. Kellerman?" Tom asked. "I did," Jessica said, "in writing, and he ignored them. He said it wasn't my concern." Then Tom called Marcus. Marcus testified about the comments Richard had made in the meeting, about the clear pattern of preferring single partners, about the way Richard had bragged after Brandon agreed to get divorced. He said something like, "That's how you motivate people," Marcus said. Like Brandon's divorce was a win for him, like he'd won something. Richard's lawyer cross-examined both of them aggressively, but there was nothing to attack. They were telling the truth, and the truth was damaging. Then Tom called me. I testified about the conversation with Brandon, about what he'd told me regarding Richard's requirements, about the emails Jessica had given me that confirmed everything. "Did your husband ever suggest that he wanted the divorce?" Tom asked. "No," I said. "He told me he couldn't explain why he wanted it. Later, he told me Richard had made it clear that marriage was incompatible with the partnership. He said Richard would destroy him if he didn't comply." "And how did his leaving affect you?" I looked at Richard. He was watching me with that same calm expression, like this was all beneath him, like he'd already won somehow. "It destroyed me," I said quietly. "I lost my husband, my marriage, my sense of security. And I lost it because a man decided that his business was more important than my life." Richard's lawyer stood up. "Isn't it true that you're seeking significant damages in this case, Mrs. Mitchell? Isn't it possible that you're exaggerating your emotional distress for financial gain?" "I'm not exaggerating anything," I said. "I'm telling you what happened." But you do stand to gain financially from this lawsuit. Yes, I stand to gain financially from proving that your client committed an illegal act that destroyed my marriage. I'd rather have my marriage back, but since that's not an option, I suppose I might as well get paid for the destruction. There was a moment of silence in the courtroom. Even the judge seemed to pause. Then Tom sat down, and Richard's lawyer had nothing else to ask. The closing arguments happened on a Friday. Tom made a clear, methodical case. Richard had coerced Brandon into divorcing me. The emails proved it. The witnesses confirmed it. It was a violation of public policy, and it had caused me demonstrable harm. Richard's lawyer argued that Richard had merely expressed a preference, that Brandon had made his own decisions, that I was trying to profit from my own marital failure. Judge Morrison took 3 days to render her decision. On Monday morning, Tom got a call that she'd issued a ruling. We met in her chambers, and she handed us a copy of the order. Vantage Capital was liable for intentional interference with contract, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violations of public policy. The damages were set at $1.2 million. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relieved. I mostly felt hollow, like justice had come too late, like money couldn't actually fix anything that had been broken. But Tom was ecstatic. "This is huge," he said. "This is going to set a precedent. This is going to make other CEOs think twice before trying something like this." Richard appealed, of course. His lawyers argued that the ruling was excessive, that it violated his right to run his business as he saw fit, that I was being compensated beyond what was reasonable. The appeal was denied. Judge Morrison's ruling stood. 6 months later, I got a check from Vantage Capital's insurance company for $1.2 million. I deposited it into my account and felt absolutely nothing. The money was real, the victory was real, but Brandon was still gone, and my marriage was still over, and no amount of money could change that. I kept the house. I paid off the mortgage. I hired contractors to renovate everything that Brandon and I had done together, just so I wouldn't have to look at his choices every time I walked into a room. The marble countertops came out first. A year after the trial, I got a call from Tom. Brandon was leaving Vantage Capital. Richard had been forced to buy out his partnership after the ruling. The insurance company had demanded it as a condition of covering the damages, and Brandon couldn't stomach working there anymore. He was moving to Miami, taking a job at a smaller firm, starting over. I was glad. I was glad he was leaving. I was glad he'd have to start from scratch, that his big partnership had turned to dust, that his choice to abandon me had ultimately cost him everything anyway. But I was also sad. I was sad for the woman I'd been when I married him, the woman who believed in partnership and loyalty and forever. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone harder, someone angrier, someone who understood that the world would take everything from you if you let it. Last month, I ran into Karen at a coffee shop, my old boss. She'd left her company and started her own consulting firm, and she asked me if I wanted to come work with her. "You're one of the best strategists I know," she said. "And you've got a story now, a real story. People are going to trust you because you know what it means to fight." I said yes. I took the job. I'm building something new now, something that's entirely mine. And when clients ask me about myself, I tell them the truth. My husband tried to destroy me, and I won. That's usually enough. The only thing I never got was an apology from Brandon. He tried to reach out once, about a year after the trial, wanting to talk about closure and moving past this. I didn't respond. There was nothing he could say that would matter. He'd made his choice, and he'd have to live with it. I learned something through all of this. I learned that sometimes the people we love will betray us for the smallest reasons. For money, for fear, for the future they think they deserve. And I learned that when they do, the only thing we can do is survive it and become someone stronger on the other side. Richard Kellerman's firm went under 2 years ago. The lawsuit had damaged his reputation, and talented people started leaving. Without them, he couldn't maintain his business. He retired to South Carolina and, as far as I know, he's living quietly now, his legacy destroyed by his own greed. That's the only justice that really matters to me now.